Okay. What's going on, everybody? My name is Mang, and today we're going to be looking some more at Shadowdark. I'm going to put this right out there, right out the bat, right out the gate and everything. This is kind of a pointless endeavor, kind of a pointless video. Because basically, what we're going to be doing here is ruining Shadowdark. It's a system that is praised and is popular because it is simple. The rulebook is really simple. The rules are very simple. Getting in, getting started, very simple process for new players, new DMs, everybody, you know. It is a very lightweight, fluid system. That's its appeal. And what we're looking to then do is ruin all that by basically just adding more rules to it. And it's a thin line because it's a very light system, which means it's very hackable. And I think the hackability and hacking it is like encouraged up to a certain point. And then if you reach a certain point where you're adding complexity, people are like, oh, I feel like you're missing the point of Shadowdark. You know, it's a game meant to be very simple. And it's like, okay, I guess I crossed the threshold. Because I've been looking at a lot of discussions, you know, in the subreddit and things like that about Shadowdark and adding on to Shadowdark and blah, blah, blah. And obviously there's a lot of mention of just like how easy it is to just like change things that you don't like or throw in new module, you know, you know, the various supplements. There's a bunch of supplements that get a lot of praise. You know, the official first party ones get a lot of mention, and like the letters from the dark third party ones are often mentioned and brought up. And it's like, you know, because there are certain things that are just missing in Shadowdark. They're not in the book. And you're gonna have to come up with stuff, right? Even the most diehard fan of Shadowdark that just loves the book cover to cover has to admit that there are certain things that are just not in the text, and you're meant to just kind of come up with it when these situations arise. That's part of being a very rules-light, fluid, flexible game. And so, okay, so there's certain things not in the book. You have to come up with it. You have to add on to it. That's good. That's fine. And maybe you write those things down. You put it in a document of like, okay, these are the additional things, so that, you know, rulings, it's the phrase, I think in Acts, it says today's rulings become tomorrow's rules, you know, because you come up with a ruling maybe on the fly in the middle of play about a certain situation that you had to adjudicate on because it's not in the book, like many other things. And then, okay, I write that down, and now that's a new rule. Because you have to be consistent. You don't want to come up with different rulings every time, even for the same situation. Or especially for the same situation. So you want consistent rules. That's important. Players don't want to get fucked over because you just suddenly decided to have a different ruling on it. So, okay, then, you know, I keep playing, I keep making rulings, they become rules, I write all that down, and suddenly I have like 10 pages of rules that I have now created for Shadowdark. And then it's like, oh no, don't do that. Because you're missing the point of Shadowdark. It's supposed to be fluid and not all these rules. And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess. It's tricky. And like, take classes, for example. The core rulebook of Shadowdark has 4 classes: fighter, priest, thief, wizard. Right? Very, very core classic classes. And a lot of people are against any sort of like these third-party supplements that add 20 classes, because it's like, get that shit out of here. This is my simple Shadowdark. I just need 4 classes and that's it. And they say, their argument is that, you know, say you want to play like a druid, like a classic sort of D&D druid. That's not one of those 4. But they would say, okay, well, then you're going to want to play a wizard. And throughout the course of play, you want to, you know, have discussions with your DM that this is the kind of wizard you want to be. You want to become a very natural wizard that serves nature and has natural sort of spell casting and things like that. And you'll... You know, a lot of the customization for characters tends to come from magic items. So then your DM, knowing that you are interested in these types of magic items, will maybe supply rumors to you, or, you know, have quests or something that are related to these types of magic items. And then in that way, you develop your wizard towards becoming an approximation of a druid. And this is how it should be for Shadowdark, rather than you start as a druid class that has druid abilities. But if that were the case, then the designer of Shadowdark would not make any other classes ever, because that is apparently going against the intention of the design of Shadowdark. But we know that's not the case, because they have put out a number of first-party classes. They've put out, you know, in the Cursed Scrolls, you have pit fighters, you have Rosgodai, you have seers, you know, you have I don't know, there's a whole slew of them, man. Witches. And then they also are apparently working on bards and rangers. You say, why do you need a ranger class? Why should there ever fucking be a ranger class that you can pick when you can just pick fighter and develop yourself towards being a ranger? And then, you know, the argument really just devolves, because it's like, really, you only need 2 classes. You just need a fighting man or a magic user. Those are the only 2 classes you need, because everything is essentially just an offshoot of that. And then really devolve that even further, and you really only need 1 class, and that's just adventurer. And then everything just sort of develops off that, depending on what choices you make in game. So, right. I think it's tricky because, like I said, this is all kind of pointless what I'm doing, because Shadowdark is meant to be overall a lighter game. But I think the exact definition and specifics of what it means to be a light game is going to depend quite a bit on your DM and the players and what they're looking for and how light they want it to be. And many, many, many people are going to be happy with Shadowdark as it's written from cover to cover, without really any house rules, changes of rules, or really addition of rules. And, you know, they're never going to write down any of their rulings and stuff. It just becomes part of kind of the fabric of their campaign, you know, and how they run Shadowdark. And it's just kind of unwritten rules that they create as they go. And for someone that wants more rules and wants more, especially what I'm looking for is customization and options, many people will say you should probably just play something that's not Shadowdark. But the thing is, no matter what system I pick, I'm going to have gripes with it. There is no perfect system. And so what I want then is to find the system that I have the easiest time altering to suit my needs. And honestly, I think Shadowdark is pretty high up there. Maybe it's not the best choice, but it's pretty high up there because it is very flexible. It's very hackable. And I do like a lot of what Shadowdark has. For me these days, in the fantasy D20 genre, I'm pretty much looking at 2 games. Shadow of the Weird Wizard, for a high-powered D&D-esque superhero kind of fantasy with just a metric shit ton of character customization options. Or on the other side, if I want something grimmer, more lethal, more old school, where it is really exciting and tense to go into a dungeon and encounter like giant spiders or something like that, I look more towards Shadowdark, because it has all of those features in it. But there are things, you know, when we recently tried going through, I think we did, yeah, we were doing Barrow Maze, I'm pretty sure, with Shadowdark. And it was good, it works, it's fine, it's all perfectly serviceable, but I was flipping through that book so many fucking times looking for rulings or rules for things that just weren't there. And yes, I understand the whole idea is that you're meant to come up with it on the fly. And I have admitted that I struggle with that more when I play solo than when I'm actually DMing. So when I actually DM, it's not really that big of a deal. And again, I point to this being kind of a pointless video because I'm trying to hack Shadowdark and customize it from a player perspective as if I were playing it. Which really only matters, I guess, for solo, because I don't know when the hell I'm ever going to get to play in a group with Shadowdark again. Ever. So it's kind of pointless all around, but I still want to do it. And this is mostly inspired, well, when we recently looked at Shadowdark, there were definitely some issues that I had and things that I'd like expanded. But then we looked at Tales of Argosa, which ultimately I'm not gonna go with as ever like running or playing or anything, but there were some good ideas from that I would love to steal and port over to Shadowdark. And so that brings us to this video, and we have accomplished nothing in 12 minutes, and I just started recording. I don't know what we're gonna do here. This is me yapping for like an hour and a half about Shadowdark and what we could possibly change or add to it. So I guess let's kind of just go through the book and start just thinking of like what I would possibly change or add on to or remove. I don't think we're going to be removing much, to be honest, but changing quite a bit. So let's skip through the intros, skip through all the basics, blah, blah, blah. There are some things already that I want to change. Okay, stats. All right, here we'll start here. All right, so Shadowdark is 3d6 down the line with the core 6 stats of D&D: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Tales of Argosa separates wisdom into perception and willpower. So willpower is much more of like the usual kind of mental aspects of wisdom, you know, for like priests and things like that. There are certain roles, certain saves based on willpower, things like that. And then perception is what you sort of think of when you think of like finding hidden things or anything involving visual acuity or oral acuity, as well as ranged attack rolls. And that's the big thing, because dexterity historically within, D&D-esque games has been either the most or one of the most important stats for every character, because it influences so many things, including range attacks, armor class, initiative, sneaking rolls, like just loads of things. And I thought that was... I don't think Tales of Argosa is the first game to break apart dexterity like that. Or, you know, move range attacks away from dexterity or something like that. But I thought it did it in a pretty simple and elegant way that I was mostly pleased with. So I actually liked that aspect quite a bit. So would it be possible then to separate wisdom here into willpower and perception? Yes, I think it would. What would that break within Shadowdark as written? Well, every character sheet ever, for one. So that's something you'd have to live with. And then I think class talents might get thrown about a little bit. Because then it's like, okay, fighter, do you go... They get an option to add +2 to strength, dex, or con. Would you also add perception in there? Or not? If you don't, that means that they are not strictly as good at range weapons as they used to be. But if you swapped it instead, so it's strength, perception, constitution, then their AC gets penalized. Or if they want to use like finesse weapons, that gets penalized. Tales of Argosa, very oddly, did not have any finesse weapons. There was no way to use dexterity for attacks in any way. So I'm not quite sure what you'd do there. And then priests would get +2 to strength or wisdom. And that would just change to willpower, so that's pretty simple. And all of their wisdom, anywhere where wisdom is written, just change that to willpower pretty much. Thieves get +2 to strength, dex, or charisma. Again, I think it's a little tricky. I feel like you'd probably have to just add the word perception in there. I think that would be just the easiest way. It makes it pretty broad, just like fighters. If you just strength, dex, con, perception. Makes it a little broad, but if I was gonna separate wisdom like that and change how dex works a bit, that would probably be the way to go. What we have to ask ourselves for every change that I'm offering here is, am I actually going to do this? If I was going to sit down and run Shadowdark for a group of gamers, new gamers, or maybe they played it before, something like that, do I actually want to sit down and just tell them these new rules because this is my version of Shadowdark? Oh boy. Honestly, the big thing is the breaking of character sheets. That sucks. Because that rules out Foundry, like, at all for actually using character sheets. But I think a lot of people tend to use, like, Owlbear Rodeo instead. Because that's literally just maps. You're just displaying maps. It has no... I mean, you can use it for grid, but you don't really use that for Shadowdark anyways. And I guess, yeah, so I wouldn't... If people just have their own character sheet, then it doesn't really matter. You'd be using Owlbear Rodeo for just displaying maps. I don't know if they have as good a Fog of War stuff or not. Maybe they do. Oh yeah, I think they do. Probably. I have no idea how you remove fog on here. We're getting distracted. We're getting distracted. I don't know. I assume there's a way to remove fog. I have to imagine. So, yeah. I mean, that really only matters if I'm playing online. But I think it's a pretty simple change that is kind of beneficial to the overall system. Because Dex is just stupidly important. For, like, practically every character. Yeah, because you fucking use Dex for initiative, you know? So it's AC, ranged attacks, initiative, any stealth thing you ever do, any sort of like trap or something that you have to dodge out of the way is dexterity as well. I mean, there's just, it's so stupidly important that I don't know, I just feel like it's good to separate it. And I didn't really think about it too much until I played Tales of Argosa, and it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And its Dex is still really good, even with that. It just means, like, you know, Dex does lose one important thing. Also, Tales of Argosa does change how initiative works a little bit, being a combination of your dexterity and intelligence. The way that it works in there, it doesn't really quite work for Shadowdark here with different rolling system. So I don't know if I would change it so that you could use the higher of your dex or int mod. But honestly, that's a pretty small thing. I don't mind. If we take just one thing away from dexterity, I think that's kind of a win. Now it does mean that there is a perception stat, which is a dangerous thing to have because that encourages players to think like, oh, I just got to roll perception all over the place, like D&D 5th edition. Yeah, and I think it's important to keep Shadowdark mostly Shadowdark in how it plays and very OSR. So you don't want to just, oh yeah, you're searching over there, roll perception. That's not how it should be done. And I think that is the danger of having a new stat called perception. The alternative that I think I have seen this happen sometimes in some game somewhere is you just have ranged attacks fall under wisdom for some reason or something like that, but that makes even less sense. So I don't know. I think I'm searching for a solution that most people don't really think of as a problem. So it might be interesting to try Shadowdark for a while with the split stat like that, but probably I'm leaning towards just keeping it as is. Yeah, it's fine. Ancestries. I think really the only issue here is that humans, the ability you get for being a human is just so good that practically nothing compares. I mean, half-orcs do get +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls with melee weapons, which is better than any fighter can get. The fighter can get +1 to melee and range attacks, but they can't get +1 on damage. So half-orc, that is like one of the only ways to get that. But I don't know, pretty much all the other ones, except for maybe halfling, because you can become invisible for 3 rounds. It is kind of a unique effect. But everything else is just like, you'd rather be human and get another talent roll. So I don't know. I don't know if I care specifically enough about ancestries, because I tend to play humans and my players tend to play humans, so it's just like, yeah, that's good. But if I was going to change this, I don't know. Honestly, just like, I don't know, would that be too powerful if you just made it so you can pick your talent at level 1 instead of rolling? Because some of the 2 and 12 effects are pretty powerful. But is it more powerful than getting double talents at level 1? I'm not sure. Yeah, the priest picking that they have advantage on Cure Light Wounds is pretty nuts. I'll agree that that's pretty nuts. But I think that's kind of the only one that would be like, oh shit. But, I mean, it is certainly possible for them to get that. And it's like, if it's possible, it can't be that busted. If it was that busted, it wouldn't be an option. You know, they wouldn't have this here. So, I don't know. Maybe human just being able to pick their talent would be a little bit more balanced. I don't know. I'm not committed to that or anything. Okay, fighters. So, a fighter is for the type of person that just wants to swing swords and destroy, you know. There's really not much subtlety here. You're not going to get any special abilities of any kind. You're not going to ever get like a cleave ability. Nothing. No mighty deeds of arms, special, you know, stuff like that. Nothing. You can use all weapons. You can use all armor, shields. You get the most hit points of the game. Well, you get the potential for the most hit points in the game. But hit dice mean that, you know, nothing's set in stone. You do get to add your con modifier, if positive, to your gear slots. Oh yeah, we didn't finish talking about stats. We kind of moved on from there. I wasn't done. Because the other thing I wanted to talk about was 3d6 down the line. Garbage. I mean, I don't like it. If I'm playing at a con or something, I'm playing a con game, or I'm playing a one-shot and it's just like a funnel or, you know, something like, whatever. Not a funnel, but like just like, okay, we're going to just do this as a one-shot, quick in and out, you know, just chaos, like, okay, then whatever. But if you're going to ask me to sit down and we're going to play for the next like 4 months in a game, and my goal is to not have my character die, and I'm encouraged as much as possible to keep my dude alive and play clever and play smart and keep him alive for as long as possible, like, let me play something more in line with what I want to play. Because by default, it's 3d6 down the line, no swapping, nothing. Unless, you know, none of your stats are 14 or higher, in which case you re-roll all 6 numbers. This isn't even how people played back in 1981, you know. Most people didn't do 3d6 down the line. They did 4d6 drop low or something, or they did 46 drop low and they assigned it to stats. This is just like some weird revisionist history of old school gaming or something. I don't know. This whole 3d6 down the line obsession. I'm against it. I don't like it. And if I was going to start brand new gamers and in the RPG world, I would not even mention that 3d6 down the line is, I mean, I might mention it as like, oh, as in like the, like, you know, like people in the Stone Age, you know, they actually rolled 3d6 for each one in a row, and that's what they had to go with. Thankfully, those days are over. So I think 46 drop low and then assign. I think that's perfectly valid. Because that way, at least, you know, you're gonna have a choice. And that a lot of Shadowdark in the character creation is about removing choice from players in order to facilitate gaming as quick as possible. And there is something to be said about that to a degree. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is very, very quick for you to sit down and get started playing Shadowdark. And if someone dies, because that's going to happen, it's very quick for them to just whip up a new character and get right back to it. at level 1. You know, you know. But there's certain concessions that I think can be made in the interest of just people being allowed to have a bit more fun, because not everyone is going to appreciate it. So 4d6 drop low and assign I think is pretty good. Axe does 5d6 drop too low to whichever stat you want, then 4d6 drop low to 2 other stats, and then 3d6 to the other 3. That's what we were doing, I think, when we tried Shadowdark recently, and I don't think our characters were busted or anything. I mean, we did okay. Did I have a character die? Didn't I have a party wipe at some point? Iran is not what I started with. No, we had the Valkyrie. Yeah, we had a Valkyrie and stuff. I think we had a Valkyrie, a thief, a wizard, and a priest. Yeah, when we were doing Sinister Stone of Sakara, that's what we had. And I'm almost certain I did 5d6 and then, you know, the rest of the process. So, yeah, I don't think it makes broken characters that can't die or anything. It just ensures that, or has a much better chance of the one stat you care about for your preferred character is higher. And it's like, yeah, I guess it is slightly slower of a process than just 3d6 down the line, but I'm willing to take that hit. And it's not like 5d6 drop lowest 2 for all 6 stats or anything. So if I wanted a little bit more simplicity, or a tiny bit more complexity for a lot of player agency, I'd go 4d6 drop low and then assign whichever ones you want. But for me, I'd probably go with the axe method if I was gonna DM for a group of people or play by myself. All right, anyways, so yeah, I mean, we're really getting into the crux of it here with classes, and it's a question of how complex do we want to make this? Like, if I'm gonna basically make a hack of Shadowdark and I'm gonna call it Dado Shark or something, you know, and it's like, this is a different game, you know, I'm basing it on Shadowdark, but this is my game, this is a different game. I can do whatever the hell I want. I can make this class as insanely complicated as I want. What is the level of complexity that I would really be looking for playing solo, but also for DMing for a group, maybe even a group that has never played an RPG before? What's the level of complexity I'd be looking for? Honestly, if I'm DMing for a group that's never ever played an RPG before, I think Shadowdark as is pretty good. I think that's a pretty comfortable level, because yeah, I have no idea how long the campaign's going to go. Who knows how long their characters are going to last. It's more about not bogging them down with rules, getting them into the game, and just so they can experience the game. So if I were to DM for a brand new group, I probably would just run Shadowdark as is. So okay, let's leave that example out of it. So what about past that, when they're looking for like Shadowdark Plus or something? How complex would I make this? So if we look at, well, okay, so the big thing is there's no player agency. There's really only 2 choices you make here. There's your weapon mastery, so you pick a weapon type, and you get a bonus to attack and damage with that weapon type. So that is a choice you get to make, but it's ultimately inconsequential, because weapons in Shadowdark basically have no difference. And it's entirely just like a slight bit of flavor, whether you pick like a sword or a warhammer or something. So it's essentially pointless. The only time that really might be a factor is if a DM gives random loot and you could find a magic warhammer and you don't have that for weapon mastery, in which case it's just kind of shitty. So there's that. So the only time it might matter is basically if you get screwed over by it. That's basically it. Then there's grit, and it's really just a binary choice. You're either choosing strength or dexterity, and you have advantage on checks of that type to overcome an opposing force, such as kicking open a stuck door or slipping free of rusty chains. It's a pretty good ability, but again, it's just a binary choice. Then there's the talents. You don't get to pick these. You have no choice in the matter. You roll. I mean, some of them do include a choice. 7 and 9, you get +2 to strength, dex, or con. So there is a choice there, and that is probably the most relevant choice you're making during character creation, other than your name. 10 to 11, you choose a kind of armor. You get +1 AC from that armor. It's sort of a choice, but not really. And it's also kind of a shitty choice, because you either pick light armor, or you don't get to see the benefit of that until you, like, make it out of your first dungeon. Because nobody can start with anything higher than light armor in Shadowdark. Chainmail costs 60 gold, which is the absolute max that you can roll for random gold. And that would mean you have no weapon or anything. So, you're wearing leather armor, like, fucking guaranteed. And so you either pick light armor, or you just don't get to see the benefit for a while, which is an awesome thing in character creation. It's like, okay, well, I want to pick, like, heavy. I want to pick, like, plate armor, because I want to be a cool plate armor dude. It's like, okay, great. Well, probably in, like, 4 sessions, maybe, you'll get your plate armor, so you can look forward to that. For now, though, here's your leather armor. Yeah. Anyways. So that's the big thing that bothers me as a player for something like Shadowdark, is I just like more choices and agency when I'm making my character. And so, again, I understand. That was the first thing I said. I know this is pointless, and this is the whole point of Shadowdark, is to be quick and fluid and blah, blah, blah. But here you have 4 classes, and really you're making like 1 or 2 decisions that kind of matter a little bit. And that's it. And so it's very quick to make new characters, and blah, 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 and you're done. But for a more meaningful game you plan on playing for a while, it's pretty light. And I would struggle to be super excited to make a new character and start a new Shadowdark campaign if I've played it for like 2 years, compared to like Shadow of the Weird Wizard, where there's like 2 million character combinations you can make. But yeah, I know, they're very different. So let's look real quick at Tales of Argosa Fighter, and let's look at the choices available to you, because I will admit, there aren't many. There aren't many. In fact, in some ways, there's like just as many or less. So, when you pick Fighter as your class, you don't get to pick your starting gear, and you actually do get to pick starting gear in Shadowdark. It's just there's not many choices, but at least you do get to pick some options. Here, you pick a fighter, you get a longsword or spear, a chain shirt, and a shield. Every single fighter that will ever be made in this game will get those things. Those, 3 things. Then skills, you get leadership, athletics, and then you roll for 3 random skills on your skill list there. So no choices there. Every fighter is going to do that same process. Then you get Deadly Strikes as one of your starting abilities. Increases your crit range to 19 and 20, and your natural 19 effects also occur on a crit. No choices there, you just get it and it's done. Then the big thing is adaptable, and you'd think here is where you get a choice, but you actually don't. You get to roll like once or twice on this table at level 1, and those are your combat styles that you get. So there's not really a choice there. You get to choose one of those then to be your default style, but yeah, not really much of a choice there. Later levels, you get to actually choose these adaptable styles to add to your repertoire, but at level 1, no. So that means, yeah, at level 1 in Tales of Argosa, your really only choices are whether you want a longsword or spear, and what your default style was from the random ones you rolled. That's it. That is fucking it. So, and honestly, it's like less choices, really. It's not a very good example. What I want to look at for Argosa, though, is like the actual abilities that you get, and whether I'd want to try and convert those over to Shadowdark or just copy them wholesale to Shadowdark. You know, Deadly Strikes is not... There's no choice involved with it. And it's not necessarily super exciting just on paper, but I think in practice it is a lot of fun and makes you feel like more of a badass fighter. Having an expanded crit range and stuff. And basically double your crit rate from 5% to 10%. And the natural 19 effects occurring on a 20 as well. And most of those are going to be trauma effects where you sever a leg or cut off an ear or gouge out an eye or something. I think that feels like a badass fighter. When we were doing Tales of Argosa last time, we were fighting those ogres and I speared that ogre through the leg and nearly severed it and stuff. And then that was able to throw him off balance enough so that our cleric, our cultist, could shove the ogre off the ledge. That felt badass, you know, that felt cool. And that was only because of Deadly Strikes, actually, because I rolled a 20, I'm pretty sure. So normally I wouldn't have, like, thrown him off balance on his leg like that. So, I don't know. I think Deadly Strikes is pretty sweet. I might just copy that over and just replace something. Maybe Hauler. Hauler is really lame. I've never seen any player ever even, like, look up with any look of excitement whatsoever about Hauler. It's pretty shitty. Replace Hauler with Deadly Strikes and suddenly you got a lot more to be excited about. Even though I just said Deadly Strikes on paper, not amazing. Like, oh, wow, that's awesome. You know, to like a newer player or something like that. But in practice, it's going to be way cooler than Hauler is. Especially because that requires your con mod to be positive, and on 3d6 randomly down the line, what are the odds of that? On average, you will not get any benefit from Hauler, ever. Ever. Throughout your entire lifetime of being a fighter. Unless you put a talent roll into Constitution, which you might, but not because of Hauler, it's because you want more health. So, Hauler, lame, nix it. I'd swap it straight out for Deadly Strikes. Call it a day. Now, as for adaptable. Okay, so there's kind of two aspects of adaptable. One is the actual combat styles themselves, the fighting styles. So if you have two-hander activated, when using a two-handed melee weapon, you get to roll damage twice and take the better result. When you have single weapon activated and you're armed with a one-handed weapon and nothing in your other hand, or a torch in your other hand, I guess, you get +2 initiative. You get +2 on any dex rolls and on party retreats. But you know, you're a bit more nimble, essentially. I mean, you could make that +1 AC, but in this game, shields only add +1 AC, so they couldn't have done that. So they made it dex rolls instead. So all of the different combat styles. How many of those could I just port over to Shadowdark, or otherwise just like the general concept of various fighting styles, like a two-handed style, a dual weapon style, a sword and board style, a ranged style, like a brutal style, an opportunistic style, charger style. I think a lot of those could be ported almost exactly as they are. Others, you know. But then there's the other part, and that's the actual adaptability part, where each adventure, essentially, I mean, it's not exactly this, but it's pretty close. Basically, it's once per battle at level 1, or a number of times per battle equal to your level. But not quite that, and I wouldn't be able to port that system over exactly. But basically, once per battle at level 1, you can swap to another style that you have. Like, at any time, like as part of an action or whatever. So, like, the charger style. You could swap over to that style when you do the charge action, and you'd get the benefit from that. And then, as a free action, at any time, you switch back to your default style that you designated. I think I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I would exactly convert it, because you could do it in a pretty similar way. You could do it so that at level 1 you pick one style. You choose, that is your fighting style. And then at level 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you pick another style. And then once per battle, you can switch styles until the end of the battle, or until you swap back to your default style. I think you could do it that way, and it would be relatively simple. Again, not as simple as Shadowdark normally is, because it's still quite a bit of text on a page. But it would represent sort of your growing prowess at just a wide array of fighting styles and fighting situations and weapons and things like that. I think it's not a bad idea. What would I do then? Would I don't know. Like, would I replace grit? I don't want to just add on something. I think things have to be replaced. We've already replaced Hauler. That's already done. So, weapon mastery seems kind of core to the fighter as well. Of just like a scaling bonus to their attack and damage rolls. That seems like the fighter's thing. They're going to want that. So I guess probably I'd replace grit. I've actually never seen it come up in when DMing. The fighters never mentioned it. And I think even when we DM, when I did solo, I don't think I ever remembered I had grit. I think we did a fighter, right? Maybe I didn't do a fighter. I don't know. It's something that I could see very easily forgetting about as well, though. And you could say the same for your fighting styles and stuff, and it's kind of easy to forget. And in fact, when we did play Terras of Argosa, I forgot about Charger multiple times every time I charged. I didn't actually do a charge action, but yeah, you know, but yeah, I guess I'd replace grit, and I'd replace it with the fighting styles. And you'd have the default style, and then every even level, you would be able to pick another fighting style that you could swap to once per battle. So like if you switch to the charger style, you could keep the charger style on for the rest of the battle, but you're probably going to want to switch back to your default style. So that would be your option. Some of them are just useful to switch once to, and some of them are like Expert Guard. If you roll a critical miss, it becomes an ordinary miss instead. Now this only really matters if you have mechanics in place to punish critical misses. Or fumbles. And Tales of Argosa does, pretty simply, like if you're in melee combat and you roll a fumble, the enemy just gets a free attack roll against you. I don't know if I would even want to incorporate that into Shadowdark, so I'd probably change Expert Guard to something else. But yeah, you can see there's some things that you'd want to just switch to, like temporarily. You get a one-time benefit because you switch to it, compared to it being your default style. Expert Guard, probably not ever going to be your default style. But Brutal. I mean, Brutal, when you inflict a natural 19 effect and you roll on the trauma table, you add +2. I had that as my default style because I didn't really have a good choice, but that might be something that you just switch to when you roll on a trauma table. And so basically, once per battle, you get +2 when you roll on a trauma table, essentially. But then other things like the two-hander, you probably always want to have that active because it's much more impactful. Pun intended. I mean, there's so many different ways that you could do the fighter, and I know we're specifically just looking at Tales of Argosa compared to loads of other RPGs, but that's because Tales of Argosa is, in a lot of ways, kind of a crunchier Shadowdark. It's just like Shadowdark plus in some ways. More so than if I was like looking at 13th Age and trying to adapt that fighter over to this. And again, in Tales of Argosa, you roll randomly on these things, but honestly, I would say pick, as I think that would be a huge factor for customization and making your fighter kind of your fighter. I don't think I'm ever going to go so far as to, like, remove the talents. So I want to keep that intact, so I don't actually want to change that much about the classes. It's just that some of these things I want to introduce a little bit more choice to character creation. And honestly, you can still keep this pretty simple. Because it's like, okay, so like the first three choices here for adaptable that you could put in is just sword and board, two-handed, dual wield. And that's going to cover like 90% of fighters. And they're going to be like the most mechanically beneficial to just have as your default style. So it's like, okay, if you really don't want any thinking here and you just want to go quick and you're going to be a sword and board guy, just pick that and go. You know, it's going to be very simple. And then it's like, okay, but if you really want to go through and look at all the other options, I mean, there's going to be plenty more, but they might not be the best default style necessarily, unless you're doing like a ranged fighter or an unarmed fighter. You know, something like that. So I think that's pretty solid, but I don't want to fuck with the talents, so we're going to keep that whole system. And the core classes very especially are based around getting a talent at odd levels, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then another different type of benefit at every even level, because your weapon mastery goes up at half your level, so every even level. So adaptable, I think, would just go along with weapon mastery, so you get, you know, a couple niceties every even level and then a talent every odd level, and at least it's something every level then. A lot of homebrew, third-party classes, stuff like that, don't necessarily follow that scheme. Okay, the priest. What are the choices when you make your priest? Well, you get a language choice, celestial, diabolic, or primordial. Many players are not going to give two fucks about languages, and many DMs don't really care about languages, so it's not much of a choice. You know, turn undead. No option there, you just know it. You get to pick a deity. Doesn't really have any mechanical benefit, but okay, you get to pick a deity. That's something, I suppose, for role-playing. And then spellcasting. This is the big thing. You get to pick 2 tier 1 spells of your choice from the priest list. How many tier 1 spells are there? Well, turn undead is a choice, but you already get that automatically, so that's not a choice. Hold on, the PDF froze again. Okay, there you go. So your choices are Cure Wounds, Holy Weapon, Light, Protection from Evil, Shield of Faith. 5 spells, and you get to pick 2 of them. So that means... And, I mean, let's be honest. You're either picking Cure Wounds as one of your choices, or you're not a good priest. And maybe that's kind of harsh, but then I think I just... Every time I DM'd and they had a priest that didn't have Cure Wounds, or I played solo and I didn't pick Cure Wounds on purpose, it's just worse. You are just a worse member of the party. It's just the way it is. And I mean, the other spells are decent. They have their purposes and things like that. But Cure Wounds is insanely valuable in a game like Shadowdark, where you can potentially cast it numerous times in a day. And it can easily heal every member of your party back to full by just casting. So, yeah, really, you have Cure Wounds and then one other spell from these 4. So, not a massive choice. Not a massive choice. But, it is kind of core to being a priest, I suppose. So a simple option here would obviously be just adding more spell options. But I think that bogs it down a little bit, because players are just going to sit there and read through all the spells because they want to make sure when they're picking something good. And then if you just make it random, then you remove the player agency that we're searching for. So I don't know if that's exactly the answer here. If we look at Tales of Argosa for the Cultist, the choices you get to make are not much. Practically none. The only choice you get to make... Yeah, funnily enough, literally the only choice a cultist gets to make in Tales of Argosa at level 1 is what deity you pick. But the thing is, I do think this is far more impactful than in Shadowdark. This is really pretty big from a role-playing perspective, and also a mechanical perspective, because you really have to follow the tenets of your deity. And you're not... These are just example ones, so, you know, obviously you can come up with whatever with your DM and all that, but you have to follow the tenets as outlined by your deity and your religion. Because if you don't, you're going to lose favor. And then if you lose favor, it makes it much more dangerous to use your blessings. And if you habitually lose favor or go against tenets, you might impose additional penalties, or you might not be able to use your blessings at all until you seek atonement. So it's pretty important to follow those. And there are also patron benefits, which actually allow for further customization of your cleric, your cultist, your priest, whatever. So like if you follow Graxus, the Iron God, you can either use all melee weapons or heavy armor. Other cultists cannot do that. You know, that is specifically because you chose this deity. And also, you may use rerolls for melee attack and damage rolls, which is pretty insane, because practically no character gets to do that. Other deities, though, like if you worship Baal, the Lord of Crows, and you get a crit with a melee attack, a living target with equal or less hit dice than you dies, no save. You have to do a dark and dangerous magic check, and you can choose not to do it, but yeah, you're just killing shit. I mean, you ordinarily crit stuff, it dies anyways, but at higher levels, this is pretty great. And also, you add some spells to your spell like blessings. So your blessings, you don't get to choose, much like adaptable, you're rolling on a d12 chart. And some of these are basically just, you can cast certain spells, but it's a blessing instead of like what magic users do. And these add those as additional options you could possibly get, or possibly choose. Because at later levels you do get to choose which ones you want. And so these blessings include a lot of the core sort of paladin / cleric stuff. Blessed Weapon, Holy Smite, Turn Undead, Divine Word, you know, Mend Flesh, stuff like that. You also get to use Will rather than Int on checks related to Divine Lore and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, mostly it's about the blessings. So I really like this. I thought this was pretty great because I love encouraging role play, because I DM for people that really struggle with that and really benefit from being like mechanically incentivized to do role play kind of stuff. And so, yeah, the deity thing I think is really good. And especially if I was going to DM a campaign, I would probably go through the trouble of crafting deities specific to my setting in my campaign. I mean, some of them might just be a renamed version of these deities, because these are all pretty good, and cover a lot of the different approaches that you might want to take. But I mean, this is a big decision. You're not going to switch deities later on. I mean, this is a pretty important part of your character, and why you're picking like a religious themed character is that you are a soldier of your deity. So, you know, this has tenets that you have to follow, otherwise you get punished. And it has the whole general vibe of your cleric, and because you know, following the Star Maiden is very different than following Graxus the Iron God. And then also mechanical benefits that differentiate you from every other cleric that doesn't follow your deity. So this is the core thing of what I would want to carry over to Shadowdark. And thankfully, you don't have to make really any changes here, because basically just choose a deity. We do have to make changes as to the actual benefits. A lot of these are not going to port over exactly. The ones that add spell-like blessings, I'm not quite sure, other than just you have access to choose those spells. So you know, normally 2 tier 1 spells of your choice. Your deity would offer additional tier 1 choices. That's pretty much it. So if you follow Baal, the Lord of Crows, only you can choose Riddle of Bones as one of your spells. No other cleric has access to that. I think that's pretty sweet, and offers a little bit more spell choice, just a little bit, like 2 or 3 extra spell choices, and also differentiates you from other priests. So that's exactly what I would do for priests, and I think that's enough, to be honest. I mean, there is the blessing aspect. But honestly, it doesn't really matter, because you get spells. Cultists in here don't get spells. They only get these spell-like blessings. The priest already gets turn undead in Shadowdark. So really all you're kind of missing is some of these other things like Holy Smite. But I'd probably just reserve that for like a paladin class anyways. Or, you know, spells. So, yeah, that's all the changes I would make to priest. Thief. What are the choices a thief gets? None. A thief in Shadowdark does not get a single choice of any kind, other than if they get this talent, they get to choose one of those 3 stats to get +2 in. That's it. Yeah, it's yeah, that's not great. I mean, the thief is a powerful class. I'm not judging that exactly. Again, we're mostly looking at player customization, agency, things like that, differentiating one class from another character of the same class. And really, with a thief, there is very little to differentiate 2 thieves. Because every thief gets backstab. If you hit a creature unaware of your attack, deal an extra weapon type damage, and that scales up at even levels. And then thievery, you just have advantage on all thief-related activities. That's it. So it does matter, you know, depending on what you buy with your starting money. You might buy the short bow, and I'm going to be a ranged thief. Or you might buy short sword and dagger, and I'm going to be a melee thief. Great, that's about it. And as you level up, still very little is going to differentiate you, except for like magic items and stuff, which goes for every character. So, Tales of Argosa has the Rogue. Choices a Rogue gets to make here. Of course, you already know it's going to be practically nothing. So, we're not... Again, I'm not praising Tales of Argosa for player choice either, but the abilities you get are more interesting here. So you get Backstab, but it is exclusively used for melee attacks. And it gives you a +4 on attack bonus, which Shadowdark does not. And in fact, I don't think you get a bonus of any kind for attacking like an unaware target or a surprise target or anything like that. Whereas this is much more traditional to like old school D&D, where you get the +4 attack bonus. I think Shadowdark in general avoids like temporary modifiers like that for ease of play. But honestly, a +4 and advantage are pretty close most of the time. So I'd probably add the word advantage here. They attack with advantage and deal an extra weapon die. Backstab does not happen that often. All right, this is not something you're going to be doing constantly in combat or anything like that. This is exclusively against a target that is unaware of you, out of combat, that you ambush or something like that. So I think Axe did it properly. If we wanted to look at Axe and their thief backstabbing. Again, this is probably just taken straight from first edition AD&D or something, but you can backstab any vulnerable opponent. Can be made in melee or with missile weapons at short range, but no farther. You get +4 bonus to hit and deal an additional die of damage at first level and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's probably the direction I'd want to take it, is you... And this one, it does not specify melee, so that's good. And Shadowdark rarely deals in any long-range shit anyways. So I don't know if you'd really have to specify that. But yeah, I'd basically want to copy Axe, more or less. Include the advantage on attack roll instead of +4, and deal an extra die of damage. They also get Finisher, where if they hit a wounded target, so something that's at half health or less, you get to add your backstab damage. That's once per target and melee attacks only. So that is specifically a benefit for melee thieves instead of ranged thieves. It's kind of an odd stipulation, but again, their backstab is melee only as well, so... Because they really don't intend their rogues to be using ranged attacks almost ever. Whereas we want to be a little bit more flexible than that. So, with the change to backstab here, to include advantage, would I also want to add Finisher? Does that make thieves too powerful? Again, it doesn't give you the advantage, it just gives you the extra damage. Oh boy, that's a tough balance question that I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer. The thing is, Tales of Argosa tends to have a bit higher health pools than Shadowdark, but I don't know. I mean, what's like an average enemy you're fighting? Like a skeleton. Okay, let's go with a skeleton. They have 11 HP in Shadowdark. That means that they would be technically wounded or injured at like 5 or 6 HP. I don't know which one of the two. So say you got a target level 1, level 2 here, and you get to attack it, and the DM says, okay, it's injured, so you can add an extra damage dice. And so instead of 1d4, 1d6, you're rolling 2d4, 2d6. Will it make a difference? Yeah, I mean, for sure. If you're attacking it and it has 5 health and you're attacking with 1d4, you're not killing it. 2d4, there's a good chance you'll kill it. But I don't know if it's game breaking or not. It's hard to say. I'd probably give that rule a try. And I don't think I would add it as finisher. I think I would just kind of include that text into backstab so we can keep it relatively simple. Then they also get tricks and techniques. So a similar D12 thing, once per battle, essentially. And these are a lot of different thief-related stuff. It's a bit much, to be honest. It's a bit much text. I don't know if I'm going to copy over all this stuff. Like, Cat's Grace, okay? If the DM allows you, you may turn a failed saber check relating to climbing, acrobatics, or falling into a success. Okay. I mean, we get advantage on all that shit. It's kind of just better. So we can do that all the time. Choking Dust, up to 1d4 targets within melee range, and make a luck con save or be rendered mute for 1d4 rounds. I mean, great. Awesome. That's, I mean, they can't cast spells, I guess, but I don't know how many enemies in this game even cast spells anyways. Or they can't shout for alarm, I suppose. That's something. Blind Sense, you can downgrade blind on yourself to near blind or negating near blind. Flash Powder, then you make targets blind. That's pretty useful. Glue Pot, you can cause one target within far range to be grabbed. Hidden Blade, you can reroll failed melee attack. Quick Reflexes, may reroll your initiative check and use the best result. I don't know. It doesn't wow me, I suppose. But I think rogues generally don't get a whole lot of options. You know, they're rogues. A good example of a game that does give rogues a shit ton of options is Shadow the Weird Wizard. At level 2, they get to really kind of... They're much more representative of, like, Jack of all trades. Like, if you want a character that can theoretically do anything, you pick Rogue. Because at level 1, they get Trickery, where they can add a boon to any roll once per round, which is sort of like rolling with advantage on any roll they want. And if they use it on an attack and hit, they do an extra d6 damage. And then at level 2, they get a choice of, like, taking a fighting style from fighters. They can take spells. They can grab any sort of, like, tradition and a couple spells. They can take stuff to improve their mobility and make them, like, easy to move through enemies and stuff. They can take Mockery if they want to, like, debuff enemies. I think there's a couple other things they can get as well, but they're extremely flexible. And so with that, at level 2, like, every person's rogue is probably going to be a little different in some way. So if we wanted to adapt something like that to Shadowdark, we could do... Yeah, change Thievery to, like, Jack of all trades, and then give just, like, a bunch of options to a thief. Like, they could pick... I don't know if you want to take away or make Thievery one of the options, because it feels, like, insanely good. You might have to, like, limit, or you could curtail Thievery to be one of the options and make it you have advantage on, like, one type of check or something, like climbing or sneaking, or, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say. It seems like such a core aspect of the class here, and it's just so powerful. Every time I think about that ability, it's like, geez, that seems like the best of any of the core classes gets. Because that's like everything that you're good, everything a thief wants to do, typically, a normal thief, they're just super good at. So it's hard to kind of remove Thievery. But yeah, if I was going to do stuff, adding on the option to take, like, a couple magic spell, or like one magic spell, one wizard spell, or one priest spell, They could grab. Maybe I would limit it to just wizard spell, not priest stuff. So one wizard spell they could take. And they can use like charisma for their spellcasting stat or something like that. Or they could take one of the fighters like adaptable styles if we converted that over. So then they could have that. And I actually the unique features has the cross-class stuff as an option. So yeah, you learn 2 fighting styles, and you begin an adventure with 2 uses of the ability, but you don't get a default style. So you have to specifically activate them. It's, you know, during a battle in order to get it. I'd probably, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'd make it like once per day or something. You can activate one till the end of a battle or something. I don't know. That could be an option. If I wanted to make the thief more of a flexible character than this. But I don't know. It's hard to say. This one's the trickiest for me. I'm not quite sure. The big thing, yeah, I mean, talking about unique features, that's one of the biggest things that I'd like to add, is at a certain level, in Tales of Argosa, it's at level 3. And you could do level 3. You could do it instead of the talent at level 3, or you could do it, I don't know, you could do it at any level. You could even do it at level 1, really, but 3 might be reasonable. You get your talent and you get a unique feature. And the unique feature is just anything you can think of as like a feature or a trait or a perk or something that your character has that other characters don't have. And you can design it however you want as long as the DM approves. It can be any sort of special ability or any sort of mechanical buff. Like if you want your thief to suddenly be able to use chainmail armor, or if you want your thief to suddenly be able to use like a long sword or something, okay, go ahead. You know, that can be your unique feature. Or if you want your priest to have like an animal companion, there you go, that's your unique feature. It's one of the most interesting things, I think, from Tales of Argosa that I really would love to throw in there, because I think it would add a lot of customization to Shadowdark with very little overhead. Because it's pretty much just whatever players can think of and whatever the DM approves. I said this about it in Tales of Argosa, that it does require the DM to have somewhat of an eye for balance, to not allow one character to just get something obscenely powerful because they reach for the moon. You know, the DM does have to curtail it to a certain level of power and everything. But if you can do that, I think it adds a lot of customization. And all you have to do is just explain, yeah, come up with a unique feature for your character. And Tales of Argosa does have a bunch of examples that you can just pick from if you can't think of stuff or whatever, and to sort of give an idea of the power level. So I'd probably try rewriting those or converting or just coming up with other examples for Shadowdark. Just to say, like, okay, well, if you really are unsure, if you're, you know, unsure of what you can kind of ask for or come up with, here's a list of some ideas. But that's a big thing that I'd like to add. Probably, yeah, just at level 3. Other than that, I'm not quite sure what to do with the thief, other than changing backstab a little bit to give you advantage and maybe deal the bonus damage to wounded targets. Wizard. Honestly, the wizard's pretty good. The wizard's pretty good. Power level and everything. It's like, it's really not bad. And I don't know what I would do with this other than just adding more spell options. But the wizard does get a decent amount of spell options, and a lot of them are pretty good. So honestly, the wizard I lean towards kind of being okay. I don't have much option. I always kind of want to have one in the party. It's what I lean towards playing if I was to play. And I think there's a decent amount of customization available to you for picking your 3 spells. So the only other thing, again, would just be adding more spells. And there is a I don't have it open, but there is a supplement that just adds load more tier 1 spells. Yeah, I don't think I would really fuck with it too much. Can't really think of anything. Because the Tales of Argosa Wizard is, I mean, essentially the same amount of options. You pick spells. That's even worse because you have to roll them randomly, and you only get 2 of them, and you can't cast them nearly as much, most likely. So, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Again, I prefer Shadow of the Weird Wizard, where I have like 800 spells to choose from and stuff, but I recognize Shadowdark needs to be a bit simpler, and I think the Wizard is solid, so I don't really have any complaints here. I would probably like to see some other variants, and there are plenty of homebrew third-party variants of the Wizard. You know, sorcerers or like chaos mages, witches, warlock, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I think for a wizard carrot class, this is fine. Okay, moving on then. Other things I'd like to change. There's a lot of stuff I don't really mind too much. Then we get to gear. Oh god, the gear section. Basically just rip it the fuck out. This, I think this is like the section I looked at the most of just like, I can't believe there's not more information here. The one thing I do really like is the crawling kit. I think that is really handy to just tell new players like, okay, you probably just want a crawling kit. It's 7 gold and you get these things. And then everyone can just write that down and blah, 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 and we move on. I do like the crawling kit. Everything else, shit. Again, for a game like Shadowdark, it is very simple. It's very easy to just grab whatever you want and move on, and you don't think about it too much. There's 3 types of armor. You can only buy leather armor at level 1. I mean, really, like, it's just, yeah. It's like purposefully designed that way that you can only buy leather armor at level 1. So you either have leather armor or you're a wizard and you have no armor. That's it. And then you can also buy a shield if you want for 10 gold, and it's plus 2 AC. It's pretty good. Most of you are going to want a shield. But then, you know, the weapons, there's just very little differentiating any of these other than, like, some of them have different damage values, and they cost different amounts. And some of them are two-handed. But, like, okay, you have the longsword and the mace, right? Longsword costs almost double and does 1d8 instead of 1d6. That's it. That's the entire difference. No special properties or traits or, you know, nothing. You can't even two-hand a longsword in this game. That is reserved for the bastard sword, which costs 1 gold more. Same damage as the longsword if you one-hand it, but you can two-hand it for 1d10 damage. Fortunately, it also takes up 2 slots of your equipment, which means it's kind of shitty. And then you can go for the greatsword for 2 more gold. Also takes up 2 slots. You have to use it two-handed, but 1d12 damage. So there's like a little bit of this, like, okay, there's something there, but not quite. The mace and the short sword. Short sword costs 2 gold more. That's it. That's the difference. And it's like, yeah, because we had to have a mace and we had to have a short sword in the game, but we didn't want to bog it down with any other rules. So that's the difference. Now, yes, I know that narratively, thematically, all that sort of stuff, there is a difference between having a mace and having a short sword that might come up during gameplay of some kind. And certain characters, I think, can't use one or the other, I guess. But that's just a decision you made. So, yeah, not that I would go with the Tales of Argosa equipment list either, because I pretty much said to rip that whole thing out. which means, as usual, you're just going back to axe. Which, yeah, has quite a bit of detail to it that you probably don't need, and also doesn't really have that many properties either. Most of these melee weapons are not that mechanically different. Like, look at the flail and the mace. They're both medium melee weapons, 1d6 in one hand, 1d8 in two hand. They both weigh 1/6 of a stone, and they both cost 5 gold. They are exactly identical. You know. I think the armor section is probably a little better, but yeah, overall, not a whole lot of variation here. So let me bring up a different alternative example. Hold on. From my other preferred game, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. If we go to weapons here. All right, so here you have, first of all, you have offhand weapons. So if you want to dual wield, the weapon in your offhand usually has to be one of these offhand weapons, like a dagger or a hatchet or a short sword. You have one-handed weapons, two-handed weapons. Some of the one-handed weapons can be used two-handed if they have the versatile trait. Versatile. So battle axes, tridents, long swords, warhammers can all be used one or two-handed. And they get a damage boost because of it. But then you also have a bunch of these other traits that really kind of differentiate weapons. So you have like brutal, which lets you reroll ones on the dice. If you roll one, you can reroll it. You have nimble, which lets you use your agility instead of strength if you want. You have bludgeoning, which I don't remember. If you get a crit, the target becomes vulnerable until the end of your next turn. So you get a boon when you attack it then. Or anybody gets a boon when they attack it. Disarming. So you can actually use it, and it's easier to disarm them with that weapon. Slashing, where if you get a crit, you roll an extra die of damage. Many of them have slow, because they can only attack once per turn instead of using like the multiple attack system. Some of them can be thrown, obviously. Some of them have special traits, like the whip or knuckle dusters and stuff. I mean, it's not a crazy amount of detail differentiating weapons, but it's just like that little extra oomph for when you have two really similar weapons that are otherwise kind of the same thing. It's nice to have some traits that differentiate them. So in our case, for like the mace and the short sword, the mace could have bludgeoning. So that, you know, if you get a crit with it, anyone attacking that target until the end of your next turn or their next turn or whatever gets to roll with advantage. Yeah, again, it's more overhead. It wouldn't fit really with Shadowdark as is, but this is Shadowdark Plus. This is Dado Shark. So that would differentiate a little bit. Short sword, give it fucking finesse. There's only one finesse weapon in the game, and that's daggers, which is ridiculous. So give short sword finesse. Spear should have long range. You know, it should have reach. That's not, I mean, that might be implied. You say, okay, I want to attack with my spear, and I want to be behind my my ally who's, you know, attacking the guy. Maybe the DM will allow that, but they're under no obligation to, because there's no rules for that. The Warhammer could have brutal or bludgeoning as well as a two-handed option. The greatsword could have slashing. The great axe could have brutal. There's no battle axe, so throw that in there. Honestly, I don't think there's a quick and easy port that I could make. I'd have to rewrite the whole list, and I'd probably take much of it from Weird Wizard. The only reason I can't port that directly is because it does use some terms and things, and all damage in that is based on different d6s. So it would be a little different. I'd have to rewrite it, but I probably would. As for armor, really the only problem is just kind of the lack of variety. It's not crucial. It's not that big of a deal. And I think a bigger issue would be to be able to make master forged armor or something. Weird Wizard does have more options, though. You got padded, leather, brigandine, ring, mail, plate and mail, breastplate, plate, full plate. And it just all scales all the way up to 18 defense. So I think there is some gaps here that you could fill in with some other options. Yeah, I mean, this system is a little different because most of these don't get added to anything. No, you don't. If you wear plain mail, your defense is 16. That's it. You know, you wear mail, it's 16. If you wear brigandine, it's 13. Unless your natural defense is like higher than that, in which case it can also just add +1. But like your dexterity or your agility in this case doesn't influence it at all. Whereas Shadowdark, 2 of the 3 armors are aided by your dex mod. So I don't think I could do a quick and easy conversion, but I'm sure there's already supplements out there that add more armor types. In fact, we have that right here. And hey, look at this. You got banded armor, brigandine armor, chainmail, auberks, lamellar, leather, padded, plate field, plate full, ring mail, scale mail. They're not hugely different. A lot of them are just like, yeah, a lot of them just have the, you can't swim in them, and they have disadvantage on stealth or something, with a lot of the same numbers. Yeah, or like it's slightly different gear slot. I mean, obviously this is functioning within the core. This is meant to just be stuff that you can very easily just add on to Shadowdark. And if a player says, hey, look at this supplement, I want to get this banded armor, it's like, okay, I mean, fine. Like, that seems like it fits in just fine, you know, it's not that big of a deal. And I think the only reason you get that is because you don't want the penalty to stealth. But yeah, I mean, anyways, that point is, this is not very, that all stuff is not very homebrew to really alter the whole game or anything. It's meant to kind of slot in. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would like a cheaper option than chainmail that is just kind of not very good, but it's more defensive than leather armor. And I think that's, I mean, is there even an option here? The auberk, I guess, is 50 gold. Ring mail. I mean, so there you go. Ring mail is 30 gold. Characters could pretty likely afford that. Maybe not much else, but if they really want defense to be high, they could do that, and it'd be 12 plus dex, but they can't swim in it, and disadvantage on stealth. So it'd be 1 higher defense than leather armor for like 20 more gold, and not being able to swim. It's not great. You're not gonna love it, but it's just like, okay, something that isn't leather armor on every fucking character. Yeah, okay. Leveling up and XP and all that stuff. XP is actually in a later section, but I'll talk about it now. This is one of the biggest things I'd like to change. Just kind of the whole core gameplay loop and intent of a Shadowdark campaign. Shadowdark campaign, as written here, is just dungeon to dungeon. Let's do dungeons. Once we're done with a dungeon, where's the next dungeon? Please get me to the next dungeon, please. I need more dungeons. And that is fine if that's what you're looking for, but I don't care for that style, and I think that probably plenty of games do involve plenty of other stuff that's not dungeons. So it's nice to not have the system entirely revolve around that. Much like Adventurer Conqueror King system doesn't entirely revolve around domain play. I mean, it's a lot of it is geared towards that. It has a lot of framework in place because of that and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, you're not getting to domain play for a long time. So the game kind of covers the whole gamut of experiences, from dungeons to exploring wilderness to establishing strongholds and all that. So the XP system of Shadowdark does not gear itself at all towards anything but dungeons. And that's because you only get XP for treasure. That's it. Not exactly. I'll admit my hyperbole a little bit here, but not much. You get XP in Shadowdark for treasure. You know, monetary valued treasure like bags of gold and magic swords and stuff like that. You also get it for obtaining blessings or secrets. So, like, you know, if you like complete a quest of some kind and they give you they might give you some treasure, but they might also tell you, you know, a secret of some kind or bless you in some way or blah blah blah. You get XP for that as well. So there's a little bit of something, but again, it's mostly just like you get XP when you finish a dungeon or something, you complete the quest. And by default, Shadowdark does not even give XP in any way for defeating monsters. I'm not saying killing monsters, but defeating them, circumventing them, overcoming them in some way. There's no XP for that. Which is interesting because most games in the OSR do give XP for that kind of stuff. So, you know, the usual thing that people say is like, well, there's no incentive to kill monsters. Because you get XP for treasure, so that you always want to just find a way around monsters to get to the treasure, because that's where the XP is. There's no reason to kill stuff. That's half true, and I think that doesn't tell the exact whole story. The thing is, you do get XP for monsters, but you get XP for monsters whether you kill them or find a clever way around them. And since combat is often very dangerous and deadly, unless it's not a fair fight, you want to find a clever way to defeat monsters or overcome them or avoid them even in order to get the XP and get the treasure. And that is an important aspect, and it's sad that Shadowdark didn't embrace that at all outside of an optional rule that's just tucked away in another page somewhere. So most people are going to think, okay, XP is treasure. But I want to copy Tales of Argos's XP charts almost exactly. This is going to be how I run Shadowdark. So XP per level, this is not going to correspond exactly. Because here... So this resets to 0 every time you level. So level 1 to 2 is 10. Level 2 to 3 is 20. So another 20, and then level 3 to 4 is another 30, and so on and so forth. And then 9 to 10 is well, 9 to 10 is 90, right? And then 10 to possibly whatever levels that is 100. So going from 9 to max level is 90 XP. Whereas in here, going from 8th level to 9th level is 250 XP. But that's because you get a lot more XP for different things. And in this system, you also go from 1 to 2 at 10 XP. So it's going to be a lot faster to get to like level 3 than in Shadowdark. But you get XP for loot in this game. Again, based on kind of the overall value, the vague value of it or something like that. This is actually not vague because it's like you obtain a specific type of loot off a table, treasure table, but you know, basically generally the same thing as Shadowdark. You get XP based off the relative value of the loot you find and recover. But then you also get XP for defeating foes. Again, not specifically killing them, but defeating them in some way. You get varying amounts of XP to based on how difficult they are, dangerous they are. Also, you get XP for saving a fellow character, ally, or innocent from severe injury or death. Directly incentivizing and encouraging heroic actions. This is like my favorite line in the whole goddamn book. This is the main reason I want to adapt this, is actually, you know, mechanically encouraging players to be heroic and do heroic things. And it's like, you can be a curmudgeon bastard all you want, but as soon as you don't get an XP because you didn't do something good and I tell you about it, you're probably going to be inclined to be heroic. And if you have a real problem with that, then again, not the kind of game for you. You also get XP for successfully retreating from a losing battle, which I think is another important thing to put in there, that you don't always have to fight to the death, because your enemies sure don't. So, I mean, as we saw when I played Tales of Argosa, I definitely didn't do that, because I was like, I'm sure I can win, I just gotta successfully roll this next 3 times, and I didn't. And then I died. But anyways, also you get XP for exploration. This is in dungeons, sure, because like discovering secret doors or traps before they go off or something like that, or riddles or puzzles. If you explore 90% of a dungeon, you get a bunch of XP. But also out of dungeons, like exploring dangerous city districts or other adventure sites, or discovering a significant lair or major point of interest, or exploring several hexes of untamed dangerous wilds. You can get XP just for that. And social interactions, influencing important NPCs or for important purposes, or playing out madnesses or addictions, like doing roleplay successfully, you get XP. You know, Shadowdark usually does all this stuff with like luck tokens. That's the big incentive. Is like, okay, you do something really cool or you roleplay something really well, it's like, I'll give you a luck token. But fuck that. I mean, people want XP. That's a big factor. So you wrap all that up into XP, and you can possibly hand out bonus XP if you want. So I love, you know, just encourage the actions that you want to see happen at your game, at your table, and this is a huge aspect of that. So yeah, this is absolutely one of the biggest things that I'm 100% changing with Shadowdark. Even if I run for new players Shadowdark as written, I'm still changing the XP system, and you can't stop me. You literally can't. Okay, I mean, I kind of need to end the video here. Thought I had more time, but spell casting, most of this is pretty fine. I like the spells overall. They're pretty simple. They're all very clear, and you know, they're not very free form. It's not like Maze Rats or something, which is a lot of fun, where you kind of just come up with like the name of a spell and then the DM and you kind of figure out what it does. I do really like that, but I understand it's not everybody's style, and it is sometimes hard for either the DM or the player to kind of come up with a good way to use a spell or what a spell might do. This is all pretty clear. It doesn't, I wouldn't never say that it super excites me or anything, but I don't know how I could really change that without just radically redoing the whole spell list. And it would either go to be more freeform like Maze Rats, or what's another one? I think the White Hack or something, I think is freeform. Or it would go just way towards the other end like Shadow the Weird Wizard, where it's just text on text on text. So I think as a simple spell system that has defined spells in the old school way, I think this is perfectly fine. I don't really have much issue with it other than just more spells. But if you have a player that's like, hey, I want more spells, I'd be like, awesome, here's another book that has like 100 of them. Yeah, or if you want to come up with a spell of your own, go ahead. Yeah, that kind of stuff. It's a very easy system to just expand without any overhead, really. You know, I've been running it where if you fail the spell check, the spell still occurs. Some people don't agree with that. Some people fight back against that, considering that, like, if you were an old school D&D spellcaster, you'd get your one spell and that would be it, even if it failed, blah, blah, blah. That would be it. Whereas, on average, Shadowdark spellcaster is going to be casting way more per day. I think that's true, but I still think about the fact that a player could sit down, get excited, they're going to play a priest, and someone is, like, dying, and they're like, oh man, I'm gonna cast Cure Wounds, this is it, this is my moment, and then they fail and the person dies, and it's just like, well, fuck that. So I don't think it's a big mechanical buff. I mean, it is a buff, but I don't think it's huge to just make it if you fail the roll, the spell still goes off unless you roll a 1. And I think it just makes players like, okay, fuck, I failed, this is it, this is my one cast of it, that's it. So I'm probably going to stick with that rule, despite what other people say. Beyond that, I like luck tokens. I do think those are a lot of fun and kind of make it a more pulpy experience overall, so that's good. A lot of the mechanics are pretty solid. I mean, this is the least likely stuff I'm likely to change because this is what Shadowdark is. It's very simple and fluid for the most part, and I want that. I mainly wanted to touch upon character agency during creation and customization, and the XP system. But there are certain things like the distances just bother me. It's just not my style. It's just too lacking in information, and it's too much based around dungeons. It just doesn't support a wider framework of a campaign. So, yeah. Tales of Argosa had slightly better guidelines. They did like melee, close, far, and very far. So there was an extra range band in there, and they had guidelines at the back of the book if you want to convert those to feet, like generally. I don't need axe and all its like exact numbers for everything, single thing in the game and all that, but I need something more than this. So I'd probably just add the extra range band of very far, and I would change far to just like double near. You know, so near is up to 30 feet, far is up to 60 feet. Very far is anything over 60 feet, and if we need to adjudicate further than that, okay. I mean, I can accept that sometimes. Very far in there, if you convert it to feet, is like 240 feet, maybe. And then if there's really like another fifth range, I'd probably just say within sight. So Shadowdark has far to be within sight during an encounter or scene, but I'd like to have an actual term in the game for within sight, like, you know. So that'd be something I'd alter a little bit. Oh, another thing, I was reading the Goblin Punch blog, and he was talking about healing and potions. And he doesn't really like the idea of potions at all, and he doesn't like the mechanics of healing potions in RPGs. And he was thinking a lot about like Estus flasks from Dark Souls. And so he thought that was, you know, the Estus flask concept is such a brilliant alternative to like classic JRPGs where you hoard 99 potions and you can just chug a lug and all that sort of stuff. Estus flask forces you to make much more calculated decisions about when and where to use them and stuff, in combat, out of combat, blah blah blah. So he offered up a number of alternatives. The one that I would lean towards is this like faith. Well, I don't know. There's a couple concepts I'd lean towards, but yeah, the one that was basically Estus flasks is that like you have a certain number of faith points per day. So like say, you know, you have 3 faith points, and at any time you can spend a faith point and an action to heal someone, including yourself, for 1d6 plus 1 or something like that, like a cure light wounds. And then he also offered the option of like if you heal out of combat instead of in combat, it's like 1d6 plus 2. So it's a little bit more if you wait for out of combat because it's not as pressing. Then there is an alternative where instead of faith points and you only have, you know, a set amount, you instead have like a faith die, which starts at 0 and goes up by 1 whenever the party sacrifices something at like a shrine or a temple or something, or a little altar. And this could be in a city, you know, at a major temple, or this could be in a dungeon if you like maybe even construct like a crude shrine to your deity or something. But then you have to sacrifice something of like of real value to you, that's like really a loss to you and your party. It's up to the DM, obviously, but it has to be significant where it's like, okay, the DM can tell then this is a big loss for them. Like 1,000 gold jewel or something that they just got, or he offered up the suggestion of like, if they're in a deep in a dungeon, they offer up their last ration or something. That's a significant sacrifice. And then the faith die goes up by 1. And that counts as your faith points for a day. And that resets back to 1 every day. It caps out at 4, but it allows a bit more like progression as you build up and you sacrifice stuff throughout the campaign to get it up to 4. And then you have your 4. And then by the time you get to 4 and you're a certain high level, it kind of falls off because it doesn't heal nearly as much. I don't know if it's ever meant to scale upwards or something like that. You could really make it gamey and like Dark Souls, and you find like upgrades that can increase it to 2d6 plus 1 or something. I don't know, but I really like the idea, and I think it also lessens the pressure on your priest to have Cure Light Wounds. You might be able to be okay without that because you have your Estus Flask or whatever, your Faith Dice or your Faith Points. So that is a concept that I actually might introduce as well. It is somewhat gamey, sure, but healing potions are also gamey. Shadowdark doesn't really have healing potions. It's not part of the design intent or anything like that. But again, that just makes Cure Light Wounds and your priest even more fucking valuable and like essential. So I think taking away that concept a little bit is a good thing. So even if it makes the game even a bit easier, that's fine. It's not really game breaking, I don't think, because it's never going to get out of hand. So yeah, I may incorporate that Faith Dice concept into a Shadowdark campaign if I was to run one. If I was just doing a one shot, I probably wouldn't bother. But if I was running a one shot, newer players or something like that, and they ended up with a priest without Cure Wounds for whatever reason, then maybe I would do Faith Points. I'd give them like 3 Faith Points and compare it to Estus Flasks. And that's that. I think the dying rules are overall pretty good and fair. Overland travel, yeah, probably just strip it out entirely. I mean, there's a couple things here I think are fine, but obviously the game wasn't really designed with all this in mind. So I would definitely go with practically any other rule system for hex travel and stuff. The carousing system where you can spend money to gain XP. Nah, I'd probably throw that out and I'd put in the reserve fund rule from Axe and the heroic funeral rule from Axe, which allows you to throw money away to give new characters bonus XP when they start. So instead of starting at level 1, 0 XP, you could start with an amount based on how much money you throw away. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to write up a whole new rule set to convert it to Shadowdark. And I think I'd have to convert it to this scale. I think this is the scale I'm largely going to work off of. And I think he probably has a metric for going beyond 9th level. No, he does for what you get, but he doesn't tell you how much XP it might cost. Well, I'm sure you can calculate that or just pick a number. So, yeah, I'd have to convert that. Again, that's really only useful for campaigns where you know that you're going to be playing for a while. But yeah, these old school games, when you die, you start at level 1. And so I like there being some rules where, characters could, if you die, the rest of your party could throw a big funeral, throw a lot of money at it, and that would allow you to come back. And it's not just like modern D&D where it's like you're coming back and you're going to be their level because of balance. It's you're coming back and you're their level because they made a significant sacrifice of their personal wealth. Which is especially important in Axe, because your money can be used for so many things, for domain play and stuff. So it's kind of a big sacrifice for them to throw you a big heroic funeral like that. But that's why I like it. And personally, you can invest in your own reserve fund as insurance, just in case you die. Let's see. So this is 150, then 150, then 250. So I don't know, maybe 1100 XP for 10th level. Something like that. But yeah, I would get rid of carousing entirely. Yeah, I gotta end the video. But real-time torch timer, I don't know. I think I need to DM with it some more to really make a decision about it. I don't think it's necessary, and I think I've just done too much solo where it's not used. So, I don't know. It probably could be lived without and just do based on turns, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I probably, when I run it again, I probably will use it. Just to continue to see how I like it. It's not something I'm adamant about removing or anything. Yeah, a lot of these rules are basically just like too light of rules, and I want to just grab something a bit more involved, like the random encounter rules and reaction roll rules and things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think there is a lot of good stuff in here that could be easily used at a table. Like, you're in the mountains and you need to get a random encounter in the mountains, and here's plenty of choices of something that could happen. I think this is all really pretty good and useful, and part of why Shadowdark's quite popular. All the monsters, yeah, in general, I do like the Shadowdark bestiary, and I think it's really easy to just add on any creatures, or just change one of these creatures to be slightly different. So I don't really have any complaints about and it's really, I mean, quite extensive of a bestiary, because most of these are very short, small entries in the old school style. If I'm running a more tactical game with tactical combat and everything, I like loads of creatures with loads of different abilities to really make it more like a board game. But for old school stuff, this is really all you need. And yeah, I think it's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, that's mostly all I really need to talk about, I guess. So what did we all change or have interest in changing? Stat generation. 5d6, drop lowest 2. 4d6, drop low. And then 3d6 for the last 3. That's how I'm going to do it pretty much going forward, unless someone really objects to it. Ancestries, possibly changing human to just pick a talent at level 1 instead of a second talent. I'm going to see if anyone else has brought that up on the subreddit or something. I don't know. Fighter, get rid of Hauler, replace it with Deadly Strikes to expand their crit range. And probably in general across the board, I wouldn't mind adding the trauma tables. It does slow down combat a little bit, but it's generally only if you specifically roll a 19, so it's a 5% chance. For a fighter, it's a 10% chance. But if a fighter crits, they usually kill anything they're looking at anyways, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, definitely cooler and better than Hauler. And then also getting rid of Grit and probably putting in those fighting styles, which would make fighters like have the most text of any of the characters, but I think it's worth it just for customizing your fighter to make them unique. Priests, fleshing out the deity selection way more and making it more impactful so that it impacts the tenants you have available to you, and if you break tenants, you might lose spellcasting, and also gives specific boons as long as you're in favor with your deity, such as being able to use all melee weapons or something like that, or you know, I don't know. I'd have to come up with some other stuff, but yes. The Thief, basically extending backstab so you roll with advantage on your backstab attack against a unaware creature. And if you're attacking a wounded creature, or half health creature or below, you get the extra damage, not the advantage. That was basically it, because I can't commit to removing thievery. And then Wizard was as is. It's all good. Gear, basically just removing this whole table and going with something much more expansive and detailed. Keeping the crawling kit, pretty much keeping armor, but probably adding some of the stuff from like the player's companion to have a few more options. Some sort of heavier armor at level 1 that they can purchase that's not as good as chainmail. And then weapons, rewriting this to add in different kind of properties that allow like rerolling damage, rerolling ones on damage dice, or causing the target to become vulnerable or something like that, or has reach, adding finesse to short sword, just rewriting the table. Rewriting the entire XP table and adding in far more XP options for defeating enemies, exploring dangerous locations, solving puzzles, socializing, and influencing people in important ways. Stuff like that. Role-playing. Redoing and adding or changing the whole like overland travel, reaction roll, random encounter, all that kind of stuff. And that's pretty much it. So I guess ultimately not a huge hack of Shadowdark. That's because, again, I'm trying to keep it pretty close to what it is, because I do think it is a very good game. There's just a few things that I think could be improved. And I think probably I'd have to imagine even the designer of Shadowdark, she would probably say, if she did a second edition, there'd be some changes. I mean, that's always how these things go. That's why there's like 7 editions of Call of Cthulhu and however many editions of D&D. I mean, it's always an evolution. So, but yeah, I like how hackable this game is. Those would be the things I'd change. But I guess that's it. That's all I had to say. I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel like playing Shadowdark and starting up something, but I don't know. The thing that we still haven't done with Shadowdark is actually do like a freeform hex crawl of some kind. Because I usually reserve that for higher power systems where I can really go nuts. But it might be interesting to try something like that with Shadowdark and see how it goes. But again, I mean, mostly hex crawl early on like that still revolves around dungeons, because I don't know, like, what else are you going to do? But I don't know, like maybe running a funnel or something and then dumping into a hex crawl and just seeing how it goes. I mean, it could be fun. We'll see. We'll see. For now, though, my name is Mang. This has been Hacking Shadowdark, and I'll see you fine folks around.